Sometimes the most life-changing moments happen on the most ordinary days. James Parker whispered this to himself as he stared at the diamond ring in his hand, wondering if he was making the biggest mistake of his life, or finally getting something right. But how did a struggling single father end up here, about to propose to one of the most powerful women in the city? It all started 3 months ago, with a broken-down car and an offer he almost refused. Rain pounded the pavement as James hunched over his toolbox in the parking lot of his son's school. He was already running late for his second job when he noticed her, a woman in an expensive suit kicking the tire of a luxury car that refused to start. Most people would have walked past, but something made him stop. "Need some help?" he called out, already regretting the words as they left his mouth. He didn't have time for this. The woman turned, frustration evident on her face before it melted into something softer. Her white skin was flushed from the cold, long silky hair now dampened by rain, but even in distress, there was something commanding about her presence. "Unless you can magically fix a dead battery in the middle of a storm, I doubt it," she replied, a hint of defeat in her voice that seemed foreign to her. James approached, toolbox in hand. "I'm no magician, but I am a mechanic. Or at least, I used to be." 20 minutes later, he'd confirmed her battery was beyond saving. No jump start would help. As they stood under her umbrella, she surprised him with words that would change everything. "You can come home with me, for coffee. I can call you a cab from there." He almost said no. He had his son to pick up, bills to pay, a life barely held together. But something in her eyes, vulnerability beneath confidence, made him pause. What James didn't know then was that Elise Winters, CEO of Winters Innovation, never invited strangers into her home. And he certainly couldn't have known that she recognized his name from the application he'd submitted to her company's maintenance department 3 times without response. The drive to her penthouse was silent, filled with the kind of tension that comes when two worlds collide unexpectedly. Neither could have predicted that within weeks, they would be fighting not just their growing feelings, but a corporate takeover that threatened everything they both held dear. James stood in Elisa's kitchen, feeling out of place among the sleek appliances that probably cost more than his monthly rent. His calloused hands wrapped around the coffee mug she'd handed him. "So, single dad and a mechanic who works at," she prompted. "A warehouse during the day, bartending at night," he answered, watching her expression carefully. "My son, Leo, is 8. His mother left when he was 2. Something flickered across her face, recognition, perhaps. "That must be difficult." "We manage," he said with the practiced smile he used when people pitied him. "What about you? Running a company must be its own kind of chaos." She laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "Chaos is putting it mildly. Especially now." "Now?" Elise hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing. Just business." But it wasn't nothing. James would later learn that Elise was fighting to keep control of her family's company against a board member named Victor Reeves, who believed a woman had no place as CEO. The same Victor Reeves who owned the warehouse where James worked, and who was about to make cuts that would leave dozens jobless. Their worlds were more connected than either realized, and as James left her apartment that night with her business card in his pocket and a promise to call about a job interview, neither knew they had just met the person who would help them defeat their common enemy. "You can't be serious," Elise said 2 weeks later, staring at James across her office desk. "You're telling me that Victor has been systematically buying out smaller suppliers to force us into exclusive contracts?" James nodded, sliding over documents he'd discovered while working at the warehouse. "He's planning to announce the acquisition of your last independent supplier next week. Once that happens, we're at his mercy," she finished, her perfect composure slipping. "This could ruin everything my father built." "Why does he hate you so much?" James asked. Elisa's laugh was bitter. "Because I rejected him, both his business proposal and his dinner invitation. Men like Victor don't handle rejection well. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. James broke the silence with a quip, "Well, his loss is apparently the entire company's problem now." She smiled despite herself. "You have a talent for stating the obvious in the most charming way possible." "It's a gift," he replied with a wink. "One of many." "Is that so?" she challenged, leaning forward slightly. "And what other gifts are you hiding, Mr. Parker?" The flirtation was unexpected, catching them both off guard. James cleared his throat. "I make a mean grilled cheese sandwich. Leo says it's award-worthy." "I'd like to be the judge of that sometime," she said softly. The moment was interrupted by her assistant announcing her next meeting, but something had shifted between them. What had begun as a professional relationship was becoming something neither had planned for. "Dad, is Ms. Winters your girlfriend?" Leo asked one evening as James tucked him into bed. James nearly choked. "What?" "No, buddy. She's my boss." "Then why does she come to my baseball games? And why do you smile different when she calls?" "Out of the mouths of babes." James hadn't realized how transparent he'd been, or how observant his son was. The truth was, over the past month, Elise had become more than his employer. She'd become someone he looked forward to seeing, someone who made him laugh, someone who saw him. Really saw him, for the first time in years. "She's a friend," he said finally. "A good friend." Leo yawned, already drifting off. "I like her. She doesn't talk to me like I'm stupid." "No, she wouldn't," James whispered, thinking of how Elise had sat with Leo at his last game, patiently explaining business concepts when he'd asked about her job. She treated his son with the same respect she showed her executives, and that meant more to James than any attraction he felt toward her. What he didn't know was that across town, Elise sat in her empty penthouse, staring at a family photo of James and Leo she'd taken at the baseball game, wondering when these two had become so important to her, and terrified of what Victor would do if he discovered her growing feelings for a warehouse worker who threatened his plans. The confrontation came sooner than expected. James arrived at work to find the warehouse in chaos. Victor had announced immediate layoffs, and his name topped the list. "It's nothing personal," Victor said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just business." But James knew better. Someone had seen him leaving Elise's office, had reported back to Victor. This was a warning shot. That night, as he tried to figure out how to tell Leo they might need to move to a cheaper apartment, his phone rang. It was Elise, her voice tight with anger. "He can't do this to you," she said without preamble. "He already has," James replied, trying to keep the defeat from his voice. "It's fine. I'll find something else." "It's not fine." Her voice broke slightly. "This is because of me, because you helped me." "James, I..." "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't make this about us. There is no us, Elise. There can't be. We're from different worlds." The silence that followed was painful. Finally, she spoke, her voice cold and professional again. "You're right. I apologize for the confusion. Goodbye, Mr. Parker." The call ended, and James felt something break inside him. He'd pushed away the one person who made him feel alive again, all because he was afraid of needing someone, afraid of not being enough. What he didn't know was that Elise wasn't calling to apologize or to confess feelings. She was calling to tell him she'd found evidence of Victor's illegal business practices in the documents James had provided. Evidence that could not only save her company but could give James grounds for wrongful termination. But pride and fear had silenced them both, and now they would have to find their way back to each other through the wreckage. 3 weeks passed without contact. James took odd jobs while applying everywhere that would consider him. Leo asked about Elise daily until finally, James had to tell him they wouldn't be seeing her anymore. But why? Leo demanded, his small face scrunched in confusion. Did you have a fight? Sometimes adults just go different ways, James explained lamely. That's stupid, Leo declared. If you like someone, you should tell them. That's what you always tell me. From the mouths of babes, indeed. That night, as James lay awake wondering if his son was right, his phone lit up with a text, board meeting tomorrow. Victor presenting final acquisition. Could use a friendly face. No pressure. It wasn't an apology or a declaration. It was an olive branch, and James found himself reaching for it before he could think better of it. The next day, he stood in the back of Winter's Innovations boardroom, watching as Elise faced down Victor and the board members who had aligned with him. She was magnificent, poised, articulate, and utterly fearless as she presented evidence of Victor's manipulation and illegal tactics. And how did you come by this information, Ms. Winters? Victor asked, his confidence wavering. Elisa's eyes found James in the crowd. From someone who taught me that sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from outside our usual circles. The vote that followed was unanimous. Victor was removed from the board, and Elise retained control of her company. As the room cleared, she made her way to James. Thank you for coming, she said formally, aware of the eyes still on them. Wouldn't have missed it, he replied with a small smile. Leo says I'm being stupid, by the way. Her eyebrow arched. Does he now? He says if you like someone, you should tell them. Something vulnerable flickered in her eyes. Smart kid. The smartest, James agreed, then took a deep breath. Elise, I was afraid. Not of you, but of not being enough for you. Of disrupting Leo's life if things went wrong. Of 100 things that don't matter as much as the fact that I miss you. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I miss you too. Both of you. And for the record, James Parker, you have never been not enough. If anything, you're more than I ever thought possible. Their first kiss happened right there, in the emptying boardroom of Winter's Innovation, witnessed by a few startled executives and one very approving assistant who had been rooting for them all along. 3 months later, James stood in Elisa's kitchen, their kitchen now, watching as she taught Leo how to make pasta from scratch. His son's laughter filled the space that had once felt so cold and empty to her, and James marveled at how perfectly they fit into each other's broken places. The ring in his pocket felt heavy. He'd saved for it from his new position as head of maintenance at Winter's Innovation, a job he'd earned on merit, as Elise had insisted on recusing herself from the hiring process. Tonight, after Leo went to bed, he planned to ask her to make their family official. What had begun with a broken-down car had led to something neither of them had been looking for but both desperately needed, a second chance at love, and the courage to take it. As Elise caught him staring and smiled that smile that still made his heart race, James knew with certainty that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simple words, "Need some help?" If this story touched your heart, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel for more content that reminds us all that love can find us in the most unexpected places, at the most unexpected times. I'd love to know which country you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below.